All right, so we had all the comments from Lincoln Riley yesterday on how he didn't take players from Oklahoma. He took players from the transfer portal, and legalese aside, you would think that Oklahoma would rank poorly in the returning production numbers, but actually, Bill, it's everybody else who had a surprisingly decent season in the Big 12, or at least a good season, who is who rank 90th or worse in returning production this year.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma's not great. They're 71st. They're right in the middle where it's not really an advantage or a disadvantage. But yeah, I mean, Oklahoma State, you kind of knew that one was going to be an issue just with what they lost. I mean, it doesn't even count losing your stud defensive coordinator, but basically losing your top two linebackers and most of your secondary. And the secondary was so good. And that linebacking court never missed a tackle. That is going to be big, even though they return a lot up front. Again, SP Plus doesn't really care if you return a good defensive lineman. It cares a lot more about the other positions. And so that's gonna hurt. They're projected to fall from 4th to 21st on defense, which is still, I mean, not terrible, but it is a fall. The offense is not really projected to get better. So that doesn't seem like a great recipe for another top 10 finish. But the other interesting one is Baylor. And this is another thing where it's just, how returning production is measured. Because you look at the secondary, they lose like 4 of their top 5 DBs. Another awesome secondary. They lose a ton of important guys. They lose 4 of their top 5 receiver targets, including Ebner. That seems very problematic from a formula standpoint. They also, Bohannon's not amazing, but they return experience at quarterback, and they're going to have the best offensive and defensive line in the Big 12. They just are. Connor Galvin, I had to check 4 times. Like, are you sure he's coming back? And maybe I just searched for it wrong. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. An All-American 6'7", 310 left tackle who didn't go pro, but it appears he's coming back. And like 4 starters are overall. Their defensive line is good, and just added Jackson Player, who I love. Just a bowling ball, just an awesome presence, and I hope that translates really well in the Big 12. Like, that seems like a top 15, close to top 15 team to me, even with the turnover receiver and DB, but the formula is not going to like that very much.
Is there like a player development edge that you see at Baylor, like with your eyes?
Right.
Do you see that program is in a place where whether it is like a returning production or an experience or
right.
the recruiting ratings that they have things moving in the right direction based on coaching, strength conditioning, development, things like that?
It's quite possible. I mean, obviously both lines took a big step forward this year. They were also experienced, and they're going to be more experienced this year. And next year, they're not going to be experienced at all. And so, we'll see how much of a difference that makes. But yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like, well, number one, it seems like if you hired Grimes as your offensive coordinator, you're going to get a lot meaner on offense. More
the line is going to be nasty. Like, isn't that sort of like one of the places Grimes came from was as a line coach?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, Abram Smith obviously is a lovely and extremely physical back as well. So he had what he needed to make an immediate impact. Over time, we'll see if they. I know some of those guys were Matt Rule recruits, and we'll see if they can maintain that with their own recruiting, but. I mean, it's certainly the identity's in place. That's a big part of it. Obviously, Aranda knows what a good defense looks like. He's been a part of plenty of them. And so it seems like that's all pointed in a direction that he wants it to go. As far as development goes, we just have to see them do it again and again and again before we can know for sure, I guess. By the way, one more thing about production in the Big 12. Iowa State loses everybody. Mm-hmm. It feels like that window's closed for a couple of years. Not to say Campbell can't do it again, but this was a humongous opportunity for them this year, and they lost a ton of close games, and it's going to be really hard for them to challenge again, I think, this year.
I might be buying low. Like, if the narrative gets just totally out there,
sure.
I might buy low on them. Like,
sure. Like, as a contender, I don't see them as a contender. They're not going to go 2-10, but I don't see them as a contender.
When did Matt Campbell get that contract extension? It was this year, right?
Probably. I mean,
timing on that.
He might do it again. It's just that's always going to be a program where it's going to be really hard to maintain a certain standard without an occasional fallback here.
One of the worst I told you so's was how hard the Cover 3 podcast went on cautioning Iowa State fans from their optimism.
Yeah.
I mean, Iowa State fans hated us. And then again, it is a painful I told you so when they don't make it to the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you hate, you never feel good about it. It's not like you're oh, they're going to be terrible and it's going to be hilarious or anything. Well, actually, I don't know. Maybe you said that, but
no, we don't. I was
Not
State's
that
not
level.
hilarious. I mean, hilariously bad. It involves, things that are much more wild, over the top, normally an explosive offense or a leaky defense. Like being very, very solid at the core elements of football is not hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, but Iowa State, like they were still 19th in SP Plus last year. That wasn't as good as expected, but it was still quite good. They just, they lose by 10 to Iowa because of a ton of turnovers. They lose by 2, they lose by 7, they lose by 3, they lose by 7, they lose by 7. It was just, they were so close to being the team they could have been, but now they lose everybody and it's going to take a little while.
I think one of the issues was you would give them a compliment by any like rational standards based on 120 years of their football program's experience, right? Like I think they can be a top 30 level team or a top 25 level team, which at Iowa State is a huge accomplishment, and they would just go nuts on you on social media.
Yeah,
right.
Well, the chips on the shoulders in the Big 12, and I'm not even going to say it's the quote unquote leftover programs. Even OU fans on Twitter have the biggest chip on their shoulder for no freaking reason whatsoever. They have been the most consistently successful program in the history of college football, pretty much, or at least the last 70 years. And they will stab you quickly. Miami fans will stab you even more quickly, but OU fans are always up there very, very, very high on the shiv list.
Oklahoma fans at least exist in real life. Miami fans are primarily like creatures of the internet. So like, I'm much more fearful of Oklahoma fans because,
Miami Twitter is so mean. It's amazing.